This is a fictional mindbender. Every Messiah needs a hype man, someone to get the masses stoked for their arrival. In media, these prophets are usually envisioned in various ways, but after watching Dune Part 2, the two most iconic messengers of their respective beliefs, I think, are Stilgar, obviously, and arguably the original OG of the prophetic hype man, Morpheus. Now, this isn't a comparison to see who's better than the other, just for the record. This is just a comparison between the two and how they're presented in regards to their religion. A brief recap here. Stilgar in the Dune series is a tribal leader of a group of native Fremen on the planet Arrakis. He speaks for them when negotiating with Duke Leto and any other interactions with other leaders, and he is a leader in times of war against the Harkonnen. The elder Fremen is aware of the legends surrounding the coming of the Lysian al-Gaib, and at first, when meeting Paul Atreides, seems rather skeptical that he could be the one that was foretold. However, as Paul proves himself in battle and quickly learns the ways of the deserts of Arrakis and the Fremen ways as well, he has his coming to Lysian al-Gaib moment, as it were. Morpheus, of the Matrix franchise, is captain of the hovercraft warship, the Nebuchadnezzar, fighting humanity's endless wars against the machines that rule the surface of the earth and forcing the surviving remnants of those people underground, and a respected leader among the other captains and elders of the underground human city of Zion. That being said, he is also, like I said earlier, the outlier because of his belief in the coming of the One, the person destined to free humanity from the Matrix and lead them to victory against their mechanical oppressors. So as I was watching Dune Part 2, I noticed that these two characters actually share many of the stereotypes that we have come to know and somewhat love of messengers of their religions. Both seem to have an unshakable faith in their respective saviors. Both are relatively respected warriors in their communities, and both serve as a mentor and a guide to their saviors before that person comes into their own. And yet despite that, I also couldn't help but notice the differences as well in how each man dealt with his faith, especially when it's under pressure. Stilgar is a grizzled leader and his gruff appearance shows it. He is blunt and straightforward, sometimes seeming on the edge of choosing violence, but is also steadfastly loyal once you prove yourself to him. However, he comes across as more fanatical as the film progresses, skepticism slowly falling away to blind faith. A faith that is so blind that even when Paul straightforwardly tells him that he's not their savior, Stilgar just interprets that as the humility of the Lysian al-Gaib and just fulfilling another sign of his savior. Perhaps the biggest standout, though, to me about Stilgar's faith is after their siege is attacked. Wounded along with the other survivors, he urges Paul to attend an emergency war council in the treacherous southern deserts of Arrakis and to speak for them, even urging Paul to kill him so that he can become the official leader of their tribe and speak at the council, as at war councils only leaders are allowed to speak. And Paul, despite seen by many of the tribe as their savior and successfully leading many guerrilla attacks against the Harkonnen, is still just essentially a war leader. He's not the tribal leader. Paul, however, refuses Stilgar's urgings, reminding the wounded and distressed leader that he never believed in the prophecies in the first place, to which Stilgar angrily pushes back, "I don't care what you believe, I believe." And that about sums it up. For Stilgar, the only thing that really truly matters about his religion is that he believes in it, even if the religion itself might refute it. It has become the center of his identity, and thus needs to be affirmed, to the point where he offers his life to Paul not once, but twice to fulfill his destiny. And when Paul finally does take on the mantle of being the Lysian al-Gaib and decides to declare a jihad against the rest of the noble houses, he is the first one to lead the Fremen armies into space in that holy crusade. Morpheus, on the surface, seems just as fundamentalist as Stilgar, his faith being so fervent that he had been searching for the One for years before actually finding Neo. And this was because the Oracle, the Matrix's soothsayer, if you will, had prophesied that he would find the One. From then on, Morpheus sacrifices relationships and a good portion of respectability among fellow captains and leaders to make this happen. And he has his crisis of faith moment later on as well, where he finds out directly from Neo himself that the entire prophecy was a long-term plan by the machines to reset the Matrix, as it were, every few years so that they can handle abnormalities in the system. That said, the differences between these two messengers' beliefs is that while Stilgar is so fervent in his belief that he can barely contain himself in the messianic ecstasy, Morpheus remains calm, cool, collective, reserved, and seemingly always in control, even when it seems that his faith has failed him. Stilgar actively pushes other Fremen to believe in Paul, whereas Morpheus doesn't push anyone. In fact, when interrogated by his commanders about why he was late for his scheduled return back to Zion, Morpheus straightforwardly tells them the truth, that they were waiting to hear from the Oracle about what the One should do. A response that infuriates his commander because, as I said before, Morpheus by now has earned a mixed reputation of being a good and intelligent commander, but at the same time, having an outdated and irrational devotion to an old prophecy that few, if any, actually believe in. And when reminded of this fact, Morpheus simply replies that,
"My beliefs do not require them to."
And to be honest with you, I do think that was one of Morpheus's boss moments, but that's a side note. Stilgar tries to push Paul into accepting his role as the Lycian al-Gaib, whereas Morpheus is patient, training Neo and still pushing him a bit, but never actually forcing his views onto Neo to the point where the young man feels smothered by it and that he has to take on the role. He lets Neo find out on his own, and at the end of the first Matrix movie, when Neo finally comes to accept that he is the One, Morpheus seemingly confirms that Neo wasn't actually the One until he himself believed it. It didn't matter whether Morpheus believed in it or not. Faith had to be self-actualized, not coerced. The biggest variance in the messenger's faith comes from their crisis moments, though. Stilgar, in Dune Part 2, is facing the annihilation of his entire tribe thanks to Harkonnen's change of tactics and simply bombarding threatened homes until the homes themselves kill them, not bothering to engage them in close combat where the Fremen are strongest, which, by the way, I think was pretty damn smart, but there you are. You could argue that the world seemed to be coming to an end for him, and he now needs Paul more than ever to take up the mantle of their leader and savior and lead the Fremen in their greatest time of need. This explains his angered and desperate response to Paul's continued refusal to take up the mantle and kill him to become the tribal leader. Morpheus undergoes a similar moment, not once, but twice. The first is when Neo is killed by Agent Smith in the hallway in the first movie, as the Nebuchadnezzar at the same time is being boarded by a sentinel. The expression on Morpheus' face says it all. His faith is coming apart because the Messiah is dead. But he is still able to fight and move and still capable of action. The second time this happens is even more devastating to him because it basically confirms that the prophecy that he had dedicated himself to was a lie. Not only that, but it also cost him his beloved ship as well. And yet, despite that, Morpheus still continues to fight, and still has faith apparently as well. Essentially, Morpheus allows his faith to adapt to new information and blend it with old information that he knows to be true. Yes, the prophecy of the One was a lie that was created by the machines. Yet, Neo still has the abilities of the One, and more than that, they extend beyond the Matrix itself. Therefore, in some way, shape, or form that he did not foresee, Morpheus' belief is still affirmed, if not changed. Stilgar's faith, however, does not adapt or change to the circumstances. Rather, it's dragged along for the ride, as it were, as fate maneuvers Paul into forcing him to take up the mantle of the Lycian al-Gaib. At the end of the day, both Stilgar and Morpheus are great characters with great scenes. And they're also fascinating and very nuanced as human beings as well. They're a look at the human condition regarding belief and how belief can or cannot adapt to changing situations. And this takes nothing away from either character, but rather they're just different interpretations of how each one reacts to it. But that being said, what are your thoughts? Leave your comments below. But otherwise, this is Fictional Mindbender. You guys have a good day.